on the last record, I kind of forgot to include myself. It wasn't intentional. I think we just got so carried away with like collaborating.
Yeah.
Maybe that was just the idea that was in our heads at the time. But I suppose this is kind of sort of like, it's a reset record. That was how we started this record, was like, let's give 2D a chance to
shine.
This is his moment in the sunshine.
On the 28th of April 2017, Gorillaz' highly anticipated fifth album Humans was released after years of patient waiting from audiences around the globe who had been yearning for the band's return ever since 2012. While a commercial and mostly critical success, the fan reaction to the album seemed fairly divided. While many hailed the album as a return to form for the band and a welcome addition, others were disappointed with the perceived overly frequent use of different collaborative artists, which caused virtual singer 2D, or real-life artist Damon Albarn, to be put by the wayside during many of the album's tracks, stepping aside to instead give the spotlight to the many guest artists on nearly every song. Albarn has, on several occasions, recognized this criticism of the album and has made it clear that he's willing to adapt and improve on what may already be there. For example, the man composed an entirely new song featuring only himself in around 3 days before its official release to appease those who felt he had been underutilized on the main album. Fresh off of the hot release of Humans, the band has now made a speedy resurgence with a fully fledged brand new album, The Now Now. Touted by Albarn himself to be a sort of reset record, with much more emphasis and attention given to Albarn and virtual singer 2D, it has now been released to the listening public. Today, I would like to give my review and analysis of the Now Now and each and every track, and have a discussion about the album. Anyone looking for an objective, fact-based review will have to look elsewhere. My opinions and personal interpretations of the themes and meanings of the songs themselves are highly subjective, but that's the beauty of art, isn't it? Especially in the case of this band. Yeah, there might be a definitive underlying meaning behind every track on the album that the artist had in mind, but it is up to the listener to discern what they choose to believe the art represents or means to them. I've kept tabs on discussions online and checked up on the lyrics on Genius.com to gauge how different people may see these tracks, and I've tried to come to my own conclusions on what each song means, and I'd like to go through those thoughts. That's what I'm gonna attempt to do here today. I didn't just want to upload a short, surface-level review as quickly as possible and offer little in terms of dialogue. I wanted to really dig in deep and go into what this album means to me. Now, I'm not a harbinger of what is right or wrong, and if you have different interpretations of the songs and their meanings, then by all means you can have them. I'm just asking for respectful, open discussion and discourse. Before we begin, I would like to thank this user who left this very insightful and thought-provoking comment on one of my more recent videos. I might be a little bit protective of Gorillaz. They are my favorite band after all. I think this person has a point. Sometimes I may go too soft on them. I think that is the case because, well, I've just tried my best to avoid pissing people off. Not that I've lied or somehow sugarcoated my opinions, however, I still stand by them, but I may just have simply been too lenient in certain regards, and that was something that got me thinking. I really appreciate constructive comments like this one, and I think these should be encouraged, so thank you. I've recently come to the conclusion that no matter what you say, someone is gonna take offense no matter how much you try to soften the blow, so it's a futile effort trying to please everyone, especially when writing a subjective review. You really can't be in that mindset. You're here for my thoughts, not for me to simply repeat what you may already believe. From now on, I shouldn't let the possibility of someone getting upset because I disagree with them on entertainment get in the way of me sharing my thoughts. So, without further digression, it's time we talk about the Now Now.
Does anyone even recognize them as albums anymore, or am I just like completely out of date, out of sync, out of place, just out, basically?
I guess we'll see when it comes out.
As most of you probably already know, my initial thoughts on the singles that dropped before the album's full release were very positive. Humility, the song that opens the album up, really was the perfect lead single without question. The bright, bouncy instrumental coupled together with a laid-back vocal performance by 2D starts this album off on a high note. Humility is a fantastic summer single with a fitting and uplifting video to go along with it. The fun, jazzy melody and awesome guitar licks provided by George Benson very well complements the singing, and I can't help but feel happy and content when listening to this little gem. The track has only grown on me since its initial release. The lyrics themselves are a little hard to pinpoint, and following discussions online, I have seen quite a few different interpretations of what they could mean. The interpretation that I tend to gravitate towards is that Albarn, or 2D himself, is calling out to the world after feeling isolated, and this may be a commentary on isolationism and keeping to oneself, something which Albarn has quite vocally spoken up against on numerous times in the past. 2D seems to call out to the person he's singing about, and lets them know that he wants them back in the picture. That's why he's attempting to make contact once more. In the chorus, the singer seems to want to get back on track, to get back to society and not be isolated and alone, as he dislikes the state he's currently in. Sometimes it can help to take some time off and keep to oneself, but you can't always resort back to such a thing. Sometimes, it can be beneficial to get back and get out there again, to get some air. So in comes the final verse, where 2D debates whether or not to pick up what's broken and put it back, or head out alone and let the person he's singing about down. Perhaps this is the point where our lead singer asks, is it worth rekindling a fallen relationship which may fall through again, or simply leave and move on? A grander interpretation could of course also be that this verse is a commentary on how many Brits feel in regards to, Brexit, and what people who voted Remain feel regarding the country. Is it really worth attempting to fix or deal with the shifting tides, or simply leave? I'm not picking any political sides here, mind you, but simply suggesting a possible interpretation of what the artist may mean with their lyrics. It's interesting to speculate on.
This country is, believe it or not, quite a small little thing, right? Don't let it become isolated. Don't let yourselves become cut off, you know.
All in all, I very much enjoy this song, and I always put it on when I want to have a good time and feel alright. The second song on the tracklist is Trans with a Z. I was initially very excited to hear one of the brand new tracks on the album, and what struck me right from the start after having listened to the few singles already available before this song was that nearly every track on the album definitely has a uniformity, an emphasis on strong synth melodies and electronic harmonies. The direction is quite clear, as on display on this fast-paced blast of energy. With a menacing droning beat, this song really does feel like being stuck in a trance, and the entire composition is quite hypnotic. The song's main synth lead is very catchy and quite memorable, and sounds really nice when put together with everything else. It's wonderful. However, something peculiar with this track is that the studio version, well, it pales in comparison to the live cut. Let me explain. The studio version, when compared to the bombastic banger feeling of the live version, is quite apparent, at least to me. The album version lacks a certain level of oomph that the live version provides, as it includes a much more prominent choir to correspond with Albarn's singing, which sounds so much smoother live. On the album cut, the lyrics are delivered in a high-pitched falsetto, which is not unusual for the band's lead singer. However, the delivery feels more powerful and so much more lively and full of energy when sung live, which causes me to conclude that the live version is far superior, and I definitely understand why many prefer it to the studio version. The lyrics themselves add to the fast and energetic atmosphere. The song lets you know that, hey, when you're in your bed tonight, make sure you take in the dopamine that passes through your head, the natural drug your body produces, which is often said to be what causes sinful behavior. 2D then goes on to ask that when someone returns home on a Saturday night after a wild night out, and are reaching their down, do they feel like he does? Do they turn into their own effigies? When they get home, are they not themselves, but instead a drunk high version of themselves that will ultimately lead to their own destruction? This then comes full circle during the end of the song, where 2D asks if people look like him and burn like him. Do people experience the same things he does? If this doesn't give you an existential crisis, then I don't know what does! The third track on the album, Hollywood, is another track that I have talked about previously. Now that I have had little over a week to fully digest my thoughts on it and let it sit for a while, I have a much clearer review of the song in my head, and honestly, it may surprise you. Hollywood is the only song on the Now Now that features prominent guest vocals, seemingly as a response to the criticism leveled towards Humans that it didn't feature 2D enough. So 2D is joined by Jamie Principle and Snoop Dogg on this track, and our lead singer delivers a direct, memorable, and quite awesome hook to set the tone of the song. It sounds great, and it is the highlight of the song to me. The track has a sporadic yet sleek feel and a building instrumental that pays off quite well when all is said and done. As I mentioned in my video detailing my initial thoughts on the track, it reminds me quite a bit of Sex Murder Party from Humans. Jamie Principle offers the perspective of someone who seems to be lost in the blissful attitude many up-and-coming artists find themselves in when they come to Hollywood, with big expectations and even bigger dreams. He tells the listener to remain vigilant and not let things get out of hand in the land of dreams, but it can be tough because, man, it knows just what to say to make you tag along whether you like it or not. I enjoy Jamie's performance on this track, and I feel as though he really gets into character. I'm glad to have him on here, and he adds quite a lot by himself. Now we reach the part of the video that I think will, ruffle some feathers. Let's talk about Snoop's verse, shall we? Listen, I think Snoop is a very competent rapper. The guy has great charisma and a great flow, and he's produced some fantastic hits over the years, so I'm not here to criticize his talent, but honestly, I think his verse on this track is kind of lacking. And let me explain why I think so before you type down your angry comments. So, up to this point in the track, we've laid down the main theme of it through 2D and Jamie. Hollywood is not the place where all dreams come true. It can be a tough place, and you may walk out of it disappointed. Hollywood is full of jealousy, and that can contribute to a toxic mindset for anyone looking to make it big there. People always talk about how seemingly great their lives are on the web, and that can rub off onto anyone who feels as though their life isn't going nearly as well. So in comes Snoop with confidence and bravado, and seems to want to reject this way of thinking. If you look at this verse through that lens, then yeah, I suppose it works. However, I can't help but feel as though his verse somewhat lacks substance. Like, the majority of the track just goes into hyping up Snoop, talking about how dope he is, that he doesn't let people bring him down and all that. Like, yeah, we know the guy is cool and all, and this is standard rap fare, but we don't really need that reinstated. I wish this verse would have instead contributed more to the overarching theme of the track, or a bigger narrative. Jamie's verses absolutely do this, but I personally don't get that same feeling from Snoop. His verse to me just feels by the numbers and usual. He's doing his usual Snoop Dogg thing, and while that works well enough, it's not terribly interesting to talk about or analyze deeper. I don't know if this is a fair comparison to make, but if you look at Snoop's verse all the way back on Plastic Beach, I think his performance there was much better and much more naturally integrated into the overall narrative the album was trying to convey. On Plastic Beach, I felt as though he was playing a character. On Hollywood, I just feel like he's playing himself. It's fine if that's what he was going for, but I can't help but be a little bit disappointed. Again, it may not be too fair of a comparison, as Plastic Beach was a much bigger album in terms of scope and story, as opposed to the smaller personal scale found on the Now Now, but since this verse is the only rap verse on the entire project, I wish it would have gone more in-depth and done more than just simply hype Snoop up. That's my opinion and how I feel, and you are absolutely welcome to disagree. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't like. However, I don't feel comfortable lying through my teeth if I'm not a fan of something, or I think something can be done better. Compared to some of the best rap features found on previous records, I don't think this one really stacks up, unfortunately. If you're ready to insult me over something as silly as that, then I would suggest you reevaluate what you're doing with your life. Next up on the track list, we find the beautiful Kansas, which is honestly one of my favorite tracks on the album. This is the first truly personal and introspective song on the album, and this is apparent right from the start, with the harsh bass giving way to a reflective and somber beat, coupled together with some immediately captivating lyrics and a very sweet and melancholic refrain from 2D, that he's not going to cry, not let himself break down. Which is about the same thing that I tell myself every time this song comes on. There is a wonderful chord progression seeping through the song, and the whole thing just makes me feel amazing emotions. I feel happy yet sad at the same time. It's intimate, soulful, and unforgettable, with a tinge of nostalgia sprinkled on top of it. The charming lyrics on the song to me detail the many emotions one feels while going through a rough breakup, with someone who may have at one point meant the world to you. It's relatable, and I think it's a message that can resonate with many. 2D apathetically keeps on telling himself that he's not going to cry, but instead finds someone else to support him, or something else to do with his time. Sometimes, distracting yourself is the best way to temporarily deal with grief, but sometimes, that can also be hard to do. In the very first verse, 2D asks himself, is he incapable of healing? Will he ever be able to forget or move on from the person he used to love and care for, or will the memory that he has fallen in the eyes of his former lover forever haunt him? He feels empty and alone and thinks he will take some time away and time to heal and forget. In the second verse, he seems to realize that in order to heal, he will have to get back into life and breathe again. However, things don't always go the way you want them to, and in the final bridge before the last chorus, 2D seems to temporarily fall back into his old habits. He asks his former lover who rejected him if they still have feelings for him. If he was right, they tell him, and if he's wrong, he'll disappear. He considers himself incapable of moving on no matter how hard he attempts to. He's stuck and still holding on to hope. He can't seem to let go just yet. Another highlight comes right after Kansas, and that's Sorcerers, which after much deliberation might be up there with Humility as my two favorite singles released from this album. The fantastic synth leads, the sweeping chords and the snappy percussion. I love everything about this track. The way 2D just glides onto it, it's just so perfect. Every time I listen to this song, I lose myself in the funky melodies and infectious groove, and I can safely say that I am absolutely addicted to it. The prominent synth melody is just such an earworm, and no, scratch that. Each and every single part of the song, from the verses to the chorus to the melodies, are all so incredibly catchy that I can't help but hum them while going by my day-to-day business. Sorcerers puts a smile on my face and makes me bop my head to it whenever it's on. So what about the lyrics? Well, here's how I see it. 2D seems to be observing the people all around him, seeing them all drum to the same beat, all trying to be like one another, and all trying to be the same. 2D instead tells the listener to slow down, and in their own time, look inwards and hold on to who they are inside. Be who you want to be. Hold on to that. We all know the people we want to be. We want to be ideal, someone who everyone else should strive to be like. However, reaching this point, or at the very least coming close to it, is not an easy task, which will not be handed to you on a silver platter. You have to earn it and get there yourself. This task can take quite some time and a whole lot of dedication, as it requires change and attention, but 2D comforts the listener by letting them know that yes, it may take time, but it is possible and you are not alone. Everyone struggles with being who they want to be and strive towards this goal. Everyone is mining their inner visions of their ideal selves, gradually coming closer. They're almost like magicians in that sense. That's an uplifting thought and one that motivates you to get back up and keep trying. You may fall, but the important thing is that you reassess what you have, what you may have done wrong, and you get back up and try again. That's the message that I get out of this song anyways. Idaho is the tranquil little song that comes next. With a sudden acoustic change of pace, this spellbinding ode to Idaho exudes a real American countryside vibe, which is certainly fitting. An acoustic guitar melody with some peaceful sprinkling melodies in the back supplies a really laid-back and easygoing feeling, which soon gives way to a grand, celestial chorus that is magnificent to listen to. The chords swell as an epic string section complements the wonderful chorus. The whole track is so sweet and so tender and could easily fit into the score of a film if it wanted to. It's the perfect song to have on in the background as you wake up in the morning and stretch your arms in your summer cottage, taking in the scenery and just relaxing. I'm feeling much more calm already. The song is simple and serene, and to me harkens back to tracks like Cloud of Unknowing from Plastic Beach, with its awe-inspiring and grandiose outro. The easygoing lyrics themselves further contribute to the gentle aura, describing Damon Albarn's experiences while staying in Bruce Willis's ski lodge in the titular Idaho. Damon, or 2D, sometimes it's hard to tell, landed in Silver Lake in Blaine County and simply took in the wilderness and the beauty all around him. Of course, the band couldn't stay in the countryside for too long as they were on tour, and so 2D expresses his love for the road and how each time he looks outside from the tour bus, he sees the beauty of Idaho before his very eyes. The second verse further details the experiences our lead singer had in the surroundings of the graceful state, simply enjoying his time there in the environment. It is impossible to not float along in a perpetual state of peace while listening to this song, and I'm very much enamored with it. It's a fine song and further brings this album higher. Something that I noticed while listening to the song live is that it sounds much bouncier and upbeat, while the studio version is much smoother. I can't decide which version I prefer. After Idaho, the pace picks right back up again with Lake Zurich, the extremely groovy disco tune that is mostly comprised of fast-paced instrumentation, only popping in with a phrase in the beginning and a short spoken word interlude halfway through. The song itself is very easy to vibe to and really catchy. It's repetitive, yeah, and in a way it may go on for a little bit too long depending on which mood I'm in, but for the most part this track succeeds in the ways it builds on the original beat and alternates between layers and sounds. It harkens back to tracks like Double Bass off of the self-titled and 68 State off of D-Sides, and it's a very nice addition to that list. Every little part and section of the song comes together well in the end, and it's a pleasure to listen to if you're in the mood to get up and move. The lyrics themselves, limited as they are, tell quite the funny story, but with an underlying positive message, at least according to me. I figured this one out together with Genius.com. Some have theorized that the person speaking on this track is not 2D but Damon Albarn himself, though that is certainly up for debate. On the song, our narrator details his hypothesized plan to build a tunnel from Zurich to New York. However, the man is rather embarrassed with sharing this suggestion to others, because even to him it sounds rather crazy. However, one morning, he comes to the conclusion that his worries and doubts should F off, because he's made up his mind to share his vision and his ideas with the rest of the world. What follows? Well, that he's not responsible for. This funny little story, I think, is a metaphor for something bigger. I think it details Albarn reflecting on the reception of humans by some, and reflecting on what could have perhaps been done differently. However, after further reflection, the man comes to terms with what he has created and what he wants to say, and decides that in the end, it is worth sharing your vision with the rest of the world despite its perceived faults and shortcomings. The line, "Everything that follows I'm not responsible for," I think tells the listener that doubting yourself or lowering your confidence is pointless. You have to go the extra step and put yourself out there and let people take you for who you are and take your vision for what it is. It's mostly pointless to keep it to yourself. If this is indeed the message the song is going for, then I will have to commend it quite a bit. Being an aspiring filmmaker and musician myself, I have trouble with self-doubt and worries about sharing my works with the rest of the world. Putting yourself and the work you've put countless hours into can be quite the challenging and frightening thing to do, but this track lets you know that ultimately, putting it out there is worth it. That's definitely a message I will carry with me into the future when I choose to unveil my future creative projects with the public, and I think any aspiring artist out there should do the same. That is the only way that you can improve or grow. After this blast from the past, we find ourselves in Magic City, with a hopeful, big, and bright sound coming through. Magic City details the splendor of emotions and thoughts going through 2D's head as he finds himself in Miami, a city which many people do consider magical due to its rapid growth over the years. It's grown so much in such a short time that many have claimed it was just like magic. The song itself has an infectiously energetic, chipper mood alongside an elegant melody, giving way to fantastic instrumentation. Each verse and chorus flow so well together that it's almost criminal, and the sweeping vocals provided by 2D give the song a dignified and marvelous feeling. It's a truly epic song and another favorite track of mine. The chorus in particular is absolutely breathtaking.
You got me lost in Magic City.
The lyrics to me represent the way 2D views this magic city and how it affects him. The song opens up with 2D observing the city from a higher state of being, perhaps literally because of taking drugs, or figuratively for observing things from a higher place, which is how I choose to interpret this piece from the live visuals during this track, together with the mention of a billboard on the moon.
I made it in hotels, but at the top of hotels. So I had really great views.
2D sees himself growing older, his hair is receding and his thoughts and emotions are growing all the more jaded the longer he goes on. While humanity is evolving and moving on with the times, putting billboards on the moon and steadily expanding, 2D is growing older. As he finds himself up here, he wants to return and come back to society. He wants to come back home. In the second verse, 2D invites the listener to come along on his journey and listen to his stories. When he's observing things from this higher stage, it's easy for him to think and relay these thoughts to the listener. Along comes the chorus as 2D finds himself lost in this magic city, overwhelmed by it all, by the bright colors and flashing lights. What's real and what isn't? Will 2D ever make it out of it and come back home? 2D is aging and he's growing old. This wary reaction to this magical city perfectly represents just how out of touch 2D feels with the rest of the world. He's confused and uncertain, and the sweet refrain in the post-chorus is especially adorable. The final verse further solidifies the message in my eyes. 2D is up there in his penthouse, painted in red, white, and blue, the colors of America. He's here and he's looking down on the people and wants nothing more than to connect with them again. He doesn't want to be isolated. The song ends on a sudden, uncertain note, and we find ourselves questioning whether or not this magic city really will let our singer go. This whole track is wholly heartrending, and the lyrics are especially charming and just feel exponentially like something someone like 2D would write. The song leads very well into the next track, and I really appreciate this song for what it is. Fireflies is the extremely emotional and somber rollercoaster ride that follows. With a mellow, downtrodden beat and introspective contemplative vocals from our lead singer, I see this as 2D's low point on the album where he seems practically defeated. Just like with previous tracks on other Gorillaz discography like El Mañana or To Binge and the like, I really have to be in the right mindset to listen to this song, as it absolutely conjures a whole lot of emotion in me, but it fits so very well into the track list and I really couldn't do without it. This truly human and intimate song details the turmoil and many difficult thoughts that arise leading up to a breakup and eventual heartbreak. I already went over my interpretation on what the lyrics mean to me in my very first video detailing my thoughts on this song, so I don't really want to repeat myself here, but the gist of the track to me is 2D feeling trapped and obsessed with keeping the failing relationship he has going no matter what. He's having trouble dealing with the pain and grief that comes with having to say goodbye to someone that means a lot to him, and he is ever chasing fireflies, the few light glimmers of hope in a sea of dark pain and anxiety. He seems to be blaming himself for the pain he's going through, asking his partner if he's the reason why he's losing them. This track to me is fantastic, and I can only commend it for digging so deep into such hard topics. The song that follows, 1%, is the shortest track on the album, coming in at only 2 minutes and 21 seconds. The song immediately strikes me as feeling ethereal, alien, and otherworldly. 2D sounds alone and isolated, and as if he's calling out into the night, trying his best to make it through to anyone who might be listening. The increasing instrumentation feels large and ambitious, and truly striking. The lyrics themselves are quite cryptic and hard to wrap your head around, but the way I choose to see it is that 2D is calling out to every world and every person or thing that is willing to listen. Everyone is receiving you now. After the song swells and grows larger, 2D seems to call out to the one or several who he is singing to, and lets them know that on the training ground for the new world, a brighter world perhaps, he'll be there for them to keep them company, because you are not alone. He's here for you, and calls for people to unify in the darkest times, and lets you know that no matter what, things will turn out okay in the end. I think this track is absolutely fine in what it's trying to do, but it's definitely too short and I really wanted more from it. I think the instrumentation itself is quite impressive and very easy on the ears, but I really did want more. The live version I think is far superior, as 2D is backed up by a graceful choir and a more prominent guitar which adds a lot more feeling to the song. The live version also adds a beautiful piano solo to close the track off, and I absolutely believe that this should have been included on the studio version. As it stands, 1% is a song that I think works about the same way as Don't Get Lost in Heaven from Demon Days. It's a song that works best in the context of the album, and not really on its own, at least in my eyes. I feel that it makes the statement it wants to make without unnecessarily dragging things out, and it feels more like an extended interlude than anything else, and more of a lead up to the final track, as opposed to being its own thing. I do think an added verse or the aforementioned piano solo where the last section of the song is stated again could have helped this track to stand out more and really tug on your heartstrings. I'm not gonna go out and say that this track is bad or that it shouldn't be on the album. It's very good for what it is, and I think it's quite beautiful and captivating, but it's not my favorite, and I think it needed to be fleshed out more in order to give it its full impact. Like I said, I think it works best in the context of the rest of the album, but not really on its own. The live version is far superior. However, as we reach the final track on the album, the pace picks right back up as we're treated to an earnest and genuine little melody on the track Sukai. And on this track, 2D gets more personal than ever before, delivering some loving and extremely heartfelt lyrics in what feels like a true 80s love ballad. When I hear this song, I imagine 2D sitting on a beach all on his own with a guitar and a drink in his hand, watching the sunset. This whole album has been much more introspective and direct than anything we've really seen in Gorillaz' discography so far, and it all culminates on this song. I never thought the final moments on Demon Days could ever be topped, to be honest, but here we have a track that very much reaches those same heights right here. I don't think it surpasses Demon Days, but it comes damn near close. Not only is this song one of my favorite tracks on the album, it may very well be one of my favorite tracks in all of Gorillaz' discography, and I am pleasantly surprised by that. While Demon Days was large in scope and delivered a message of hope and bright possibilities, Sukai is much more personal and a whole lot more vulnerable. It's absolutely stunning and so impressive. What starts out as a calming, simple and careful tune soon transitions into a grandiose blast of euphoria as the percussion picks up and the instrumentation boosts, resulting in absolute brilliance. It's magnificent to listen to, and the little glockenspiel outro to close off the song is very nice. It's the perfect way to close things off. The lyrics themselves are very powerful and very interesting to me. I don't know if I'm even fully able to grasp them on my own, so I'll give it a shot. Strap yourselves in, this may take a while. At first glance, this may seem like any other love song, and while it could certainly pass as that in certain interpretations, I think there's an underlying message lurking around in between the lines. 2D asks why LA is so complicated for him, and he seems to be staying up in the dead of night just thinking. Perhaps he's fantasizing about the dream life many people see in Los Angeles. 2D says that even if loving the person he is singing about is a felony, something wrong, he will continue to do so despite what anyone may have to say, because he's so obsessed with this person. He's a renegade. Another way to look at it perhaps is that he's asking Los Angeles if loving the city is wrong, but I don't know if that's a stretch. I do think 2D is referring to a person when he's singing about loving them. No matter how much happens, how many times this person rolls waves over him, 2D will always want to come back to them and attempt to be forgiven, even if he's not at fault. But things aren't as simple as that either. I think 2D is conflicted about how he feels. A part of him is soft on this person, but I think another part hates them. He wants to be a regular guy for them, and he feels as though he never made that clear, but then he goes on in the very next line to state that he wonders why this person looks so beautiful to him now that they're so sad. 2D explains that he will always think about this person, always. That's why he wants to call them back, to always be with them and to stay with them for a long time, no matter how much they may hurt or abuse him. He is still holding on to the good times that they had together, and that may be why he continues to be so divided on what to think. A part of him wants to stay, and another part wants to leave because he has to run soon, perhaps because of the frantic pace he finds himself in while on tour. I think the line about 2D calling this person back harkens back to Humility from the beginning of the album, where he called this person to avoid isolation. Now, I've seen a certain interpretation of these lyrics pop up frequently in discussions about what the song may mean and who the song may just be referring to in an Gorillaz universe setting, and I think you people probably know who I'm talking about. Yes, many people have theorized that the person 2D is singing about is our fellow green satanic bassist, Murdoch, who is currently in jail, separated from the rest of the band, isolated. 2D and Murdoch have a complicated relationship to say the least, and they have spent years together. 2D absolutely suffers from Stockholm Syndrome when it comes to Murdoch, and Murdoch is an absolute jerk to pretty much everyone. I am in no way justifying or excusing his behavior, and 2D often becomes the main target of his aggressive tendencies and abuse. It seems to me that despite all the agony, misery, and abuse that Murdoch has put our lead singer in, a part of him still misses Murdoch and wants him back in his life. All times with Murdoch must not have been bad, and this perfectly describes the dilemma that many suffering from Stockholm Syndrome find themselves in. They may still remember those good times and want them to return, despite every hardship they may have gone through. They may have this vision of the person their abuser was at one point or should be, and they're still clinging on to that semblance of hope that everything is or will be okay despite everything they go through. This, to me, is a complicated and highly complex message, and one that I think many people can personally resonate with. It can be so very difficult trying to cling on to hope, and trying to fix a broken relationship with people. You look back on the good times that you had at one point, and you want them to come back. This can often cloud your judgment and make you go against what your senses are telling you, or make you wonder what you really want. A part of you hates, and a part of you wants nothing more than approval. Whether the song is actually about 2D's complicated and conflicting feelings about Murdoch, or about a hypothetical relationship in general, there are many signs pointing towards the fact that this may just be the case. I don't want to explicitly go with the interpretation that the song is about a romantic relationship. It may just be about a general one. Love doesn't always have to mean romance, after all. It may be about something romantic, or it might not be. I don't want to declare this theory as absolute indisputable evidence, but the fact that the visuals during the live performances showcase various visuals of Murdoch, while 2D in-universe sings about how he'll always think about you, it becomes hard to deny. I choose to personally believe that, yes, the song is about Murdoch and about how 2D, despite being happy and content without the man in his life, a part of him, no matter how small, still misses that presence. Again, I'm not confirming it as I was initially wary about it, and you are welcome to have your own interpretation, but it's something that I'm still debating.
Talking about Reset, I think that this record, it's somehow kind of, because it's got my voice, which is 2D's voice, it really does focus the sort of characters around the record more so than Humans, which has so many guests. You know, it's quite hard for the characters to sort of pop out, you know.
This song is an achievement, and extremely touching and extremely moving, and one that I will come back to many times in the future. I'm sorry for spending so much time on this track in particular. There's a lot I want to say about it, and I am absolutely in love with it. It's a top tier track for sure. And with that, the album is over and done with. So what do I think about it as a whole? Honestly, even though this album was seemingly rushed into production quite soon after the release of Humans, I think this might be Gorillaz' most consistent album yet. It's definitely on a smaller scale as opposed to that of previous outings excluding The Fall, but I'm quite happy that we've been able to receive such a personal, intimate project that dives deeper into the thoughts of 2D himself. It feels more akin to a 2D solo album as opposed to a fully fledged Gorillaz project, but that may have been intentional. The album shares similarities with that of The Fall, as it does feel like a collection of songs detailing the singer's experiences while touring, but this one definitely feels much more polished and less scattered, and it's so much more than that album ever was.
And I'm trying to sort of be quite up, which is quite hard for me to be sort of optimistic, but I think I've managed it in this record. Musically, I'm not sort of naturally, that's not my... I don't really make kind of sort of happy music, but I sort of, somehow this record sort of turned out quite happy.
This is my personal theory of the overarching theme that permeates throughout the album and what it all could mean. Just remember, theory does not equal fact. However, the way I choose to view this album is this. Just as The Fall was a sort of musical diary for Damon or 2D while traveling through America, I think this album does something similar, but I just don't want to leave it at that. That's not enough. I think what this album wants to showcase is what happens when a conflicted soul finds themselves confined and detached from reality, and while they may have all they could ever want or wish for and are living the dream, they still find it hard to connect with people and truly appreciate the beauty all around them. Think about it. 2D isn't really alone. He's got the rest of the band there with him, he's on tour and so he's obviously surrounded by folk, but a part of him must feel disenfranchised and secluded from everyone else. He must feel like an outsider, a left hand, someone who people perhaps don't fully get because he has trouble expressing himself. I think 2D spends most of this album alone, deeply invested into his darker thoughts and what is going through deep inside of him. He seems completely obsessed with the person or several people that he continues to refer to all throughout the album. He's lost and he's afraid, and he's worried he's pushing people away. He is growing older and he's feeling it, and he constantly has to keep up with the changing times and the way the world is evolving around him. I think this all stems from the fact that when he's all alone in his hotel rooms and all alone observing the people down in the streets, he finally has time to really sit down and think about his existence, and that's when all these thoughts flourish, when he chooses to remain hidden. Yet, in the end, there are glimmers of hope out there, and 2D isn't alone once he opens his eyes. It is possible to step out of the isolation you may find yourself in, even if it takes time. You can step out into a new world and see things for what they are, and find people who truly do value you. Perhaps you can seek out love, care, and support when you need it. It will be difficult sometimes, and sometimes things may go wrong, but you have to keep going and keep trying. So in the final moments of the album, our lead singer decides to snap out of his retreat and once more call out into the world and seek out those who may listen to him. He personally decides, after debating whether or not it is worth attempting to rekindle a relationship or let it fade away, he'll still go for it. It may fall through and it may hurt again, but that's a chance he's willing to take to feel alive again. It may not work out and it may lead to further pain, but it beats being on his own. He's willing to risk it. That's what I get out of this album anyways. The Now Now is without question the band's most accessible and usual album so far. It's not pushing any real boundaries in terms of musical composition as opposed to the previous albums. For some, that may be a tad disappointing, and I definitely understand that concern. I think it boils down to what you look for in a Gorillaz record. This album is playing it fairly safe when you get down to it, but for what it is, I think it's brilliant. I wonder if each Gorillaz album really has to push the envelope of what we expect from popular music. Perhaps they do, perhaps they don't. I think that's quite a subjective question. There is a vintage retro feeling throughout the entire album which does wonders, which makes the whole album feel both nostalgic and familiar. As I've stated, it's much more stripped back and gives more time for Damon Albarn to shine with his incredible vocals. I prefer this direction and this approach as opposed to what we found on Humans, which in my opinion got a little bit out of hand with guest features last year. That's just what I think, and it really depends on what someone is looking for in a Gorillaz record. I don't feel as though there's a single track on here that I actively dislike or am put off by. Some tracks fall short of their full potential, but I would still come back to each and every one of them for further listens. The project is on a smaller scale and doesn't really push any envelopes and isn't really revolutionary, and for some, I can definitely see how that will be an issue. However, I found myself digging this album quite a bit, and I'm happy to have it added to the band's library. Oh yeah, I should probably also rank the albums in terms of how much I enjoy them, right? Well, number 1 is obviously Demon Days, because why not? Number 2 is Plastic Beach. Number 3, honestly, I think the Now Now is up at number 3. Number 4 is Gorillaz. I rank the Now Now a little higher than the self-titled because while the self-titled has a lot of fantastic tracks and some really good hit singles, I much prefer the thematic through line that follows the Now Now. Number 5 is Humans, and number 6 is The Fall. So what's next for Gorillaz, eh? Hashtag Free Murdoch? More music videos? More music? We'll have to see what the future has in store for us. For now, I hope you enjoyed this review and analysis of the Now Now. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I really appreciate that you decided to sit down and get through it all. Thanks for watching everyone. Stay awesome. Goodbye.